Hello, everyone. My name is Raman. My pronouns are she, her. I work in access services, and the book I chose to read was Care Work by Leah Lakshmi. And the passage I'm going to read, I'm just going to give a content warning. Oh, sorry, also a physical description. I'm wearing a black cap, glasses. I'm a brown woman with a white and brown cardigan and brown jeans. And just a content warning for this specific passage that I'm reading, because it does involve things like colonialism and racism and other forms of trauma that marginalized people have faced. So I just want to give that before I read the passage. So this excerpt is called Concrete Tools, Liberation Politics, and Poetry. This is disability justice. I'd like to offer a quick definition and history of what we mean when we say the words disability justice. This is important for so many reasons, but especially because our work and terminology are in danger now and always of having the fact that they were invented by Black, Indigenous, and people of color erased and their politics watered down. There is a specific danger in that happening with disability justice, as disabled Black and Brown creators face a specific invisibilization and erasure of our political and cultural work. I want to give both Black and Brown people and femmes who invented the term credit and be clear about what disability justice means and what it doesn't. In the words of Sins and Valid co-founder and executive director Patty Byrne, while a concrete and radical move forward towards justice for disabled people, the disability rights movement simultaneously invisibilized the lives of people who lived at intersecting junctures of oppression. So disabled people of color, immigrants with disabilities, queers with disabilities, trans and gender non-conforming people with disabilities, people with disabilities who are houseless, people with disabilities who are incarcerated, people with disabilities who have had their ancestral land stolen, amongst others. Disability Justice Act, that was not part of the excerpt. Activists, organizers, and cultural workers understand that able-bodied supremacy has been formed in relation to other systems of domination and exploitation. The histories of white supremacy and ableism are entwined, both forged in the crucible of colonial conquest and capitalist domination. One cannot look at the history of U.S. slavery, the stealing of indigenous lands, and U.S. imperialism without seeing the way that white supremacy leverages ableism to create a subjugated other that is deemed less worthy, abled, smart, capable. We cannot comprehend ableism without grasping its interrelations with white supremacy, colonialism, and capitalism. Each system benefits from extracting profits and status from the subjugated other. 500 plus years of violence against Black and Brown bodies includes 500 plus years of bodies and minds deemed dangerous by being non-normative. A disability justice framework understands that all bodies are unique and essential, that all bodies have strengths and needs that must be met. We know that we are powerful, not despite the complexities of our body, but because of them. Disability justice holds a vision born out of collective struggle, drawing upon the legacies of culture and spiritual resistance within 1,000 underground paths, igniting small persistent fires of rebellion and in everyday life. Disabled people of the global majority, Black and Brown people, share common ground, confronting and subverting colonial powers in our struggle for life and justice. There has always been resistance to all forms of oppression, as we know through our bones that there have simultaneously been disabled people visioning a world where we flourish, that values and celebrates us in all our mirror beauty. To me, disability justice means a political movement and many interlocking communities where disability is not defined in white terms or male terms or straight terms. Disability justice is to the disability rights movement what the environmental justice movement is to the mainstream environment movement. Disability justice centers sick and disabled people of color, queer and trans disabled folks of color, and everyone who is marginalized in mainstream disability organizing. More than that, disability justice asserts that ableism helps make racism, Christian supremacy, sexism, and queer and transphobia possible, and that all of those systems of oppression are locked up tight. It insists that we organize from our sick, disabled, broken, beautiful, as Alex Pauline puts it, bodies, wisdom, need, and desire. It means looking at how Indigenous and Black and Brown traditions value sick and disabled folks, not as magic cripples, but as people of difference whose body spirits have valuable smarts, at how in BIPOC communities, being sick or disabled can just be life, and also how sick and disabled BIPOC are criminalized. It means asserting a vision of liberation in which destroying ableism is a part of social justice. It means the hotness, smarts, and value of our sick and disabled bodies. It means we are not left behind. We are beloved, kindred, needed. When we do disability justice work, it becomes impossible to look at disability and not examine how colonialism created it. It becomes a priority to look at Indigenous ways of perceiving and understanding disability, for example. It becomes a space where we see that disability is all up in Black and brown and queer trans communities, from Henrietta Lex to Harriet Tubman, from the Black Panther Party's active support for disabled organizers, 2-month occupation of the Department of Vocational Rehab, to force the passage of Section 504, the law mandating disabled access to public spaces and transportation, to the chronic illness and disabled stories of second-wave queer feminists of color like Drew Jordan, Gloria, Audre Lorde, Marsha P. Johnson, and Barbara Cameron, whose lives are marked by bodily difference, trauma surviving brilliance, and chronic illness, but who mostly never use the term disabled to refer themselves. Many of us rely on state funding and services to survive and fight for things like Affordable Care Act and the Americans with Disability Act to remain protected and expanded. Our focus is less on civil rights legislation as the only solution to ableism, and more on a vision of liberation that understands that state was built on racist, colonialist ableism and will not save us because it was created to kill us. A movement where, in the words of Sin and Ballad, we move together with no body left behind. Thank you.
We go to, thank you so much, Kasi? Are they here?
And if he's not here today, we can move on to our next reader.
Okay, Kelly, pre-recorded?
Yeah, if I.
Oh,
We're gonna
Julie.
do the live.
Yeah,
ones first.
we're gonna do, focus on, prioritize our live readers.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Pollard. I'm with Accessibility Resources. I use she, her pronouns. I am a middle-aged white woman with curly hair worn up, so that means it's mostly gray. Today, when I wear it down, it is brown too. I am wearing a charcoal gray hoodie representing Highline College Achieve, and also like Jerry, I'm wearing pants. Today, I'm going to read to you an excerpt from a bio of Lydia XZ Brown. Lydia Brown is a disability justice advocate. I'm reading this from the AI description from Google. Is a disability justice advocate, organizer, and scholar. Their work focuses on violence against disabled people, especially those who are multiply marginalized. They have also examined how algorithmic decision-making systems discriminate against people with disabilities. Lydia has a full range of all sorts of things that I could talk about, but currently Lydia, well, I don't know politically currently, but they're the director of public policy at the National Disability Institute. Lydia Brown uses they, them, or no pronouns, and Lydia has been a speaker here at Highline 4 years ago for Disability Justice Week, and I'm part of what I'm reading this today, this part of their bio. I chose it because it resonates with me. I could say that I believe everything that I could say these I statements from Lydia, and believe that they are also I statements for me. But I also want to encourage people to go back into the Highline College YouTube channel and check out Lydia's presentation, which is called Against Ableism and White Supremacy, Disability Justice is Our Liberation. It may be a 4-year-old presentation, but it was and remains to be fire. So here I go. Here are some of Lydia's core political and ethical beliefs that I share. I believe in honoring the humanity and dignity of every person. I believe that there is no such thing as a person who is useless, worthless, or pointless. I believe that we have to take accountability for the harm we cause. I believe that we all have the capacity to harm, and that we have a responsibility to try to reduce our capacity for harm. I believe that we are not defined by our worst mistakes or moments. I believe that everyone deserves safety, nutrition, housing, healthcare, self-determination, autonomy, community, support, access, and wellness. I believe that we do not get free until we all get free. I believe that justice is not just us. I believe in using whatever resources we may have to challenge oppression, injustice, and violence in all their forms. I believe that community and collective action will save us, not the state, not charities or nonprofits or NGOs, that stands for non-government organizations, not academic institutions, not lawyers or professionals. I believe in accountability that isn't rooted in punishment, police, or prisons. I believe that movements for justice and liberation require multiple tactics as a part of short-term and long-haul strategies. I believe that dreaming and building the future we want are just as essential to social justice as calling out and fighting against harms. I believe that it is not possible to address the problem of ableism without addressing the problems of white supremacy, capitalism, gender-based oppression, settler colonialism, and other forms of systemic and structural violence, oppression, and domination. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have Alpha?
Alpha.
Ready to go off?
Are you ready to read?
Choose wherever you want. Here, go for it.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
My name is Alpha. I'm from Guinea, a coastal country in West Africa. Today, I'm gonna read The Little Prince, reading by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. First chapter. Once, when I was 6 years old, I saw a magnificent picture in a book called True Story from Nature about the primeval forest. It was a picture of a boa constrictor in the act of swallowing an animal. Here is a copy of the drawing. In the book it said, boa constrictors swallow their prey whole without chewing it. After that, they are not able to move, and they sleep through the 6 months that they need for digestion. I pondered the plight then over the adventures of the jungle, and after some work with a colored pencil, I succeeded in making my first drawing. My drawing number 1, it looked like this. I showed my masterpiece to the grown-ups and asked them whether the drawing frightened them. But they answered, frightened? Why should anyone be frightened by a hat? My drawing was not a picture of a hat. It was a picture of a boa constrictor digesting an elephant. But since the grown-ups were not able to understand it, I made another drawing. I drew the inside of the boa constrictor so that the grown-ups could see it clearly. They always need to have things explained. My drawing number 2 looked like this. The grown-ups' response this time was to advise me to lay aside my drawing of boa constrictors, whether from the inside or the outside, and devote myself instead to geography, history, arithmetic, and grammar. That is why, at the age of 6, I gave up what might have been a magnificent career as a painter. I had been deserted by the failure of my drawing number 1 and my drawing number 2. Grown-ups never understand anything by themselves, and it is tiresome for children to be always and forever explaining things to them. So then I chose another profession and learned to pilot airplanes. I have flown a little over all parts of the world. And it is true that geography has been very useful to me. At a glance, I can distinguish China from Arizona. If one gets lost in the night, like knowledge is valuable. Arizona, yes. In the course of this life, I have had a great many encounters with a great many people who have been concerned with matters of consequence. I have lived a great deal among grown-ups. I have seen them intimately close at hand, and that hasn't much improved my opinion of them. Whenever I met one of them who seemed to me at all clear-sighted, I tried the experiment of showing him my drawing number 1, which I have always kept. I will try to find out so if this was a person of true understanding. But whoever it was, he or she would always say, that is a heart. Then I would never talk to that person about boa constrictors or primeval forest or stars. I would bring myself down to his level. I will talk to him about bridge and golf and politics and neckties, and the grown-ups will be greatly pleased to have met such a sensible man. So I lived my life alone without anyone that I could really talk to until I had an accident with my plane in the desert of Sahara 6 years ago. Something was broken in my engine, and as I had with me neither a mechanic nor any passengers, I set myself to attend the difficult repairs all alone. It was a question of life or death for me. I had scarcely enough drinking water to last a week. The first night, then I went to sleep on the sand, 1,000 miles from any human habitation. I was more isolated than a shipwrecked sailor on a raft in the middle of the ocean. Thus, you can imagine my amazement at sunrise when I was awakened by an old little voice. It said, if you please, draw me a ship. What? Draw me a ship. I jumped to my feet, completely thunderstruck. I blinked my eyes hard. I looked carefully all around me, and I saw a most extraordinary small person who stood there examining me with a great seriousness. Here you may see the best portrait that later I was able to make of him. But my drawing is certainly very much less charming than its model. That, however, is not my fault. The grown-ups discouraged me in my painter's career when I was 6 years old. And I never learned to draw anything except boas from the outside and boa from the inside. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much, Alpha. Can we go to Janae on Zoom?
Hello, thank you. My name is Janae Stanfield. I use
If
she,
you
her
could,
pronouns.
are they there? If
Yeah,
you
can you hear me?
share your name, your pronouns, a brief physical description of yourself, and the title of and author of what you're reading.
Yeah. My name's Janae Stanfield. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman in my mid-30s. I've got shoulder length blue hair. I'm wearing a black t-shirt that says Disability Pride. Can you not hear me?
Could she hear me if I talk into the
I
microphone?
think so, yes.
Okay, hold on.
Wait, we can't hear you yet.
Okay.
I'll dance a symbolic dance when you're. Oh, we can hear you laughing. Okay, take it away.
All right, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. All right. Hello again. My name is Janae Stanfield. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a white woman in my mid-30s. I've got shoulder length blue hair. I'm wearing a black t-shirt that says Disability Pride and a baseball cap, a WPA baseball cap. I'm trying to remember the other things that I'm supposed to be sharing. I'm going to be reading an excerpt from the essay, Autistic Long Form, Short Form, No Form, Ecotextia, and Autistic Poetic Forms in Leah Lakshmi Piepzna Samarasina's The Future is Disabled. I'm very excited to read this today as an autistic person, especially right now in a climate where many folks who have neurodivergence and disabilities are especially under attack with lawsuits for against the Section 504 and the Make America Healthy Again EOA. So I'm just glad to kind of share my pride in being an autistic person. I do want to give a quick definition for a term some folks might not be as familiar with that I'm going to use when I'm reading this essay, and it's allistic, which is ALLISTIC. So this is a term the autistic community uses to refer to non-autistic people. So allistic means non-autistic. Thank you. All right. When we claim and name for ourselves the ways we perceive and communicate reality, we push back on all those who hate us for talking too long or too short or not at all, who try to force us to assimilate into allistic reality, who shoot us for being non-speaking. We claim our right to exist and the ways we do so joyfully. I am doing a similar form of playful autistic claiming and thinking in this essay, in love and gratitude to other autistic creators exploring autistic languages and communication, and hope it will be a useful part of the conversation. By autistic long form, I mean not the common autistic communication strategy for some of us of, well, taking the long way to get to where we're going conversationally or communicatively. We meander. We are like streams or rivers that wend our way along a course and go our own way doing it. Our communication has its own logic. There are rocks and bumps and deposits to wind around, explore, weave into the communication. Rarely is that logic of a straight line. When you ask us what happened, we have to start at the beginning and stop to have several improvised side note scenes along the way that are part of the story in order to tell it. We have to tell you this bit for context, which reminds us of this other bit. It's a very anti-capitalist writing and short story and storytelling strategy. In a way, it does not emphasize scarcity or getting to the point. Autistic long form is one of those things that gets autistics yelled at, a la, get to the point, or why are you being so annoying, or accused of taking up too much space. I still constantly apologize for my winding river. Sorry this is taking so long. Sorry, long story short, long story long. I've had people get impatient or angry with me for talking this way, and sometimes there's a point to this. As I heard a friend say once, I'm paraphrasing, they are aware they speak in a way that is the only way often they can speak. And it is also not a way that is accessible for some people, including other neurodivergent people, because it is a lot of words. And yet here we are. People might bark, get to the point, and there might be a valid point to that ask. Spoons or time or the sense that we're taking up so much damn space to the limitation of others. But there's often a rage at the way we talk that does not have anything to do with those things. We feel ashamed of it. We get a lot of microaggressions about it. We get told that no one will read a 7-page letter. There is a decolonization and a decapitalization of time when we long form. a sense that the story and all its bridges and rivers is the important thing, that time is not money, that there should be enough time to tell the long story that leads to another long story. Autistic long form overlaps with another maligned form, sometimes known as info dumping. I don't know if an autistic person made up that term, but it's always smacked of shame to me. Dump is not positive and feels one-sided. Talking a lot about something you care about comes from a place of love and caring and wanting to share about it to show as much. When someone mentions a subject, we use what's sometimes known as horizontal empathy or empathizing with someone and sharing our own experience with something to show that empathy. Both those forms can have abundance of words and abundance of care to get it right. Thank you.
One.
All for your report.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's go to Danette on Zoom.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my name is Danette Haynes, and I'm in the Human Services Department studying to become an SUDP. PD counselor. So today I go by she her, by the way. I'm of course a black female, well, of course, but I'm a black female with twists in my hair, with a gray and white shirt on. Um, Today I'm going to be reading from The Autistic Brain by Temple Grandin and Richard Pinnock. And I'm gonna start off with a couple of experts who telling about first why what they wrote about in the book, and then I'm gonna start with chapter 1, the meaning of autism, and read a couple of pages out of it. Temple Grandin may be the first famous person with autism, a condition that affects 1 in 88 children. Since her birth in 1947, our understanding of our understanding of it has undergone a great transformation, leading to more hope than ever before that we may finally learn the cause of and treatment for autism. Weaving her own experience with remarkable new discoveries, Grandin introduces the advance in neuroimaging and genetic research that link brain science to behavior, even sharing her own brain scan to show which anomalies might explain common symptoms. Most excitingly, she urges the raising and educating kids on the autism spectrum, most focus on their long overlooked strengths to foster their unique contributions. And the autistic brain, Grandin singular prospects into the heart of the autistic revolution. And then this starts on page 11, where I'm going to start reading out of the book. It says, while I've written extensively about autism, I never really written about how the diagnosis itself is reached. Unlike meningitis or lung cancer or strep throat, autism cannot be diagnosed in a laboratory, though researchers are trying to develop methods to do so. As we'll see later on in this book, instead of as with many psychiatric syndromes such as depression and obsessive compulsive disorder, autism is identified by observing and evaluating behaviors. Those observations and evaluations are subjective, and the behaviors vary from person to person. The diagnosis can be confusing and it can be vague. It has changed over the years and it continues to change. The diagnosis Oh, sorry. The diagnosis of autism date back to 1943 when Leo Kanner, a physician at Johns Hopkins University and a pioneer in child psychiatry, proposed in a paper A few years earlier, he had received a letter from a worried father named Oliver Triplett Jr., a lawyer in Foster, Mississippi. Over the course of 33 pages, Triplett described in detail the first 5 years of his son's Donald life. Donald, he wrote, did not show signs of wanting to be with his mother, Mary, who could be perfectly oblivious to everyone else around him too. Oh, sorry. He had frequent tantrums, often did not respond to his name, found spinning objects endlessly fascinating. Yet, for all of his development problems, Donald also exhibited unusual talents. He had memorized the 23rd Psalms, the Lord is my shepherd, by the age of 2. He could recite 25 questions and answer from the Presbyterian Catechism verbatim. He loved singing. He loved saying the letters of the alphabet backwards. He had a perfect pitch. Mary and Oliver brought their son from Mississippi to Baltimore to meet Canner. Over the next few years, Canner began to identify in other children's traits similar to Donald's. Was there a pattern? He wondered. Was these children all suffering from the same syndrome? In 1943, Kenner published a paper, Autism Disturbance of Affective Contact, in the journal Nervous Child. The paper presents the case histories of 11 children who Kenner felt shared a set of symptoms, one that we would today recognize as consistent with autism: the need for solitude, the need for sameness, to be alone in the world that never varied. From the start, medical professions did not know what to do with autism. Was the source of these behaviors biological, or was it psychological? Were these behaviors what these children had brought into the world, or were they what the world had instilled in them? Was autism a product of nature or nurture? So I think I'll stop right there. Thank you guys very much for letting me read, and it was nice participating today.
Oh, where is the mic? Hold on, this is on. No.
Thank you, everyone, for listening attentively and respectfully as our readers shared their work or their books of interest. Raman, Julie, Alpha, Janae, and Danette. When we finally have a final video, I think is it going to go on our library YouTube? We'll be adding a couple, 2 or 3 pre-recorded videos that we don't have time for today. But I wanted to open it up. Does anybody have, I think we'll start in person and then we'll go online. Anybody in person want to comment on any of the readings on disability justice, violence against multiply marginalized, the future is disabled. I learned a new word today, aliistic, and autism in your life or family or friends. Anybody in the room have a comment about any of those readings that were presented today? Anybody in person? About any of those topics?
Let me know and I will find you with the microphone.
Okay, let's switch to Zoom. Does anybody on Zoom land like to comment about any of the topics of the readings that were presented today? I believe that we do not all get free until we are all free. Talking a lot about something you care about, being called info dumping or microaggressions or autism or disability justice. Anybody online?
Yeah.
I just,
Go ahead, Pete. I'm sorry.
um, Sure. I was just gonna say thank you for this.
Oh,
Quite a
hold
few
on,
books to add to
Are
my
you-
reading list.
or someone else.
For I read Unmasking Autism pretty recently, and it gave me a new understanding of myself, and just to the extent that I had self-stigmatized and diminished myself because I had treated myself the way I believed other people treated me. I allowed them to show me what my worth is, and I'm glad that I'm starting to see how it's wrong, and it's not the case, and I don't have to do that anymore. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. So you recommend that book, Unmasking Autism?
Yeah, definitely recommend that. I think it's Devin Price. I don't think we read that today, but I read that recently, and great book.
Thank you for the recommendation. Anybody in person? Michael?
Yeah, we have that book in the library.
Oh, he has. Yeah.
It's giving a low battery warning, so we'll see how long this goes for, but and I'm getting away from being underneath the speaker to avoid feedback, but I really enjoyed, I think it was Janae's reading where it talked about the autistic long form with stories that go on and digress and take detours, and the way I often think of it, parentheses within parentheses, because while I've certainly, I've never been diagnosed. As far as I know, I'm neurotypical, but every so often I hear about things which kind of make me question that, and listening to that description of how of the autistic long form, which is a phrase I hadn't heard before. It just it's one of those things that makes me wonder, because it very much sounds familiar with how I tell stories, which I'm sure Prairie could could agree with, yes, as she nods. So I'm gonna look more up on that and find the source, where that phrase came from, because I really like that.
Thank you, Michael. I'm gonna read something from chat from Steve. It says, I will share that my mother was born with autism, and she was also an artist with pencil and could sketch like if she were a robot. Interesting. Thank you, Steve, for sharing that. Anybody in the room, in person, have a comment about anything that's been said about the readings, or jostled your brain about any of these topics? Ableism, disability justice. Kelly?
I will talk a little bit about the book that Pete was just talking about too, because that's what I was going to read, Unmasking Autism. Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm a tech tutor. I'm a dude in a cardigan and short brown hair, a little on the chunky side, pretty friendly, got lots of freckles. So I do not identify as autistic. I've never been diagnosed or evaluated. I do have ADHD, anxiety, and depression. And reading Unmasking Autism was really affirming for me, because it talks a lot about all the work that goes in on a daily basis, day in and day out, to be normal, or to be like low maintenance for the neurotypical people around you. And I think books like that and events like this are really important, because it does affirm people like me who are occasionally fucking exhausted from all this, and just need like a little bit of, no, it's not just you, it's not easy. For other people doing it too, but we're all gonna get through it. So that's me, and we do have that book at the library, so I highly recommend it. It's really good, it's really easy, really well written.
Language, Kelly, language. Thank you. I think, Monica, we wanna wrap up. We wanna thank everyone for coming and being attentive and listening attentively and commenting on the readings or sharing from your life experiences. Like Steve, take it away, Monica. Thank you for coming. It's really heartwarming to see so many of you during these I don't even know what to call them times, to come together and talk about neurodiversity is really special, so thank you.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jerry, and thank you so much to all of you for sharing your perspectives and for being just existing together with us in this space. So we are so grateful for all of you and for all your work to create such a welcoming and accessible space today. Before you head out, we do have some post-event surveys. We would love to get your feedback on what you liked about this event and how we can improve our next event. So we've got print surveys. We also have a QR code, so if you prefer to fill it out online, you have that option. And as Jerry mentioned, we will be posting the recording of this event, including some unseen pre-recorded footage on the Highline Reads LibGuide. And so if you have any questions or suggestions for future events, please reach out. We would be happy to hear from you. And in the meantime, help yourself. We have plenty of hot tea and cookies that we would hate to go to waste. So please feel free to take some home with you, take some to your friends and family members and loved ones. Thank you all so much for joining us.
Hi, my name is Jasmine. I'll be reading an article titled Autism, Dyslexia, ADHD, How Colleges Are Helping Neurodivergent Students Succeed by Olivia Sanchez. Nikki Elliott skipped the 5th grade. She was so smart that she could have skipped another, she said, but her mother didn't want her in class with older boys. And so she was always bored in school. She had a near photographic memory and didn't need to study, she said, so she never learned how to. She remembers finishing her assignments in 5 minutes and spending the next 30 waiting for her classmates to catch up. When she got to college, where classes were much more difficult, she said, I really had a big crash and burn. Elliot is what's now called twice exceptional, a term used to refer to children who are gifted in some areas but also experience a learning or developmental challenge. In Elliot's case, that challenge was attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, which made it difficult for her to manage her time and focus her attention. She remembers being in college and thinking, people told me I was so smart, but why am I struggling so hard? She became a special education teacher and said she never stops thinking about how to create a world in which a young Black student like herself could be taught to work with, instead of against, her learning differences to reach her full potential. Now, a clinical professor in the School of Leadership and Education Science at the University of San Diego, she's helping to open, in August, the school's Center for Embodied Equity and Neurodiversity. At its simplest, neurodiversity is the idea that everybody's brains work differently and that these differences are normal. Neurodivergent, which is not a medical diagnosis, is an umbrella term that refers to people who have autism spectrum disorder, ADHD, dyslexia, and other atypical ways of thinking, learning, and interacting with others. Embodied equity, the other term in the new center's name, refers to an anti-discrimination approach that considers all aspects of people's identities, including race, gender, ability, socioeconomic status, when addressing social problems. Who gets to develop the genius? Elliot said. Who gets the constraint? Who gets pushed more toward the social conformity? And how do we create a space for all learners to thrive according to their unique design? Elliott said the center's work will fall into 4 main categories: training K through 12 teachers and education support staffers, training community college educators, working on policy issues that affect neurodivergent students, and offering programs to set up neurodivergent students for success in college and the workplace. The training is being funded through contracts with schools, colleges, and other organizations. Additional costs will be covered by grants from philanthropic foundations, Elliott said. We really have to work to change the mindset of faculty to understand the ways in which these adaptations to the delivery and development of content could make all the difference for so many more highly bright and capable students to thrive in higher education, Elliott said. If teachers and education support staff are equipped with strategies to help students whose brains work differently, Elliott hopes that more of these students will have the option to go to college, with access to programs designed to help them transition beyond high school. More neurodivergent students will have the skills they need to succeed when they get there, Elliott said. As the public understanding of brain differences expands, college leaders are trying new strategies to help make campuses more hospitable to neurodivergent students. At the University of California, Berkeley, Lisa Garcia Bedolla, Vice Provost for Graduate Studies, convened a task force to identify the needs of neurodivergent graduate students. The task force is focused on medical care and access to screenings or assessments, disability accommodations for students and for employees, because grad students often work for the university in some capacity, and potential changes to the curriculum. Garcia Bedolla said that the needs of neurodivergent students force academics to confront a bias in which needless inflexibility is equated with academic rigor. San Diego State University offers a class focused on cognitive and social differences. It's designed for neurodivergent students or those who want to work in fields such as social work, special education, or psychology. According to the course description, topics include executive functioning and time management, social cognition, context awareness, and how to take on the perspective of another person, communication and relationship skills, and self-advocacy. Ina Fishman, the founding director of SDSU's Center for Autism and Developmental Disorders, said that although there's been a huge paradigm shift, meaningful change for neurodivergent college students will take time. It's one thing to ask schools to make accommodations for a learner. It's a whole other empowering thing to help the learner take the bull by the horn and understand themselves. I don't mean to imply that it could be done like that, Fishman said, snapping her fingers. I'm sure for everybody, including the big systems like universities, it's not a simple transition to this new way of thinking about neurodiversity. This work is also complicated by the fact that it's virtually impossible to know exactly how many students stand to benefit, in part because definitions of neurodivergence vary. Many experts believe the number of students with brain differences that fit under the neurodivergent umbrella is growing, whether because of an increase in people with such conditions or because of reduced stigma, greater awareness, and better identification of such conditions. For example, data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention shows that the rate of autism spectrum disorder diagnoses has been steadily increasing since 2002. In 2020, an estimated 1 in 36 eight-year-olds had an autism spectrum disorder diagnosis. Some experts argue that the rise is the result of overdiagnosis. Conditions such as autism can go undiagnosed for various reasons, including whether the student's parents have been educated about such conditions or have the money and time to take their child to the appropriate doctors to be assessed. The number of colleges where at least 5% of students report having a disability has risen from 510 in 2008 to 1,276 in 2022, according to data from the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System. But this measure is imperfect. It includes students who have physical disabilities. Also, roughly 2/3 of college students with disabilities who choose not to disclose the disability to their college. A lot of students, when they leave K through 12, they want to wash the label off them and start fresh, Elliott said. They want to believe that they can do well in college without it, or that they would be mistreated or stigmatized if they let people know. Experts say that students whose brains work differently often face challenges during their K through 12 education. When they get to college, the challenges don't stop, they just change. Loudon B. Jerome, a professor of psychology and education at Teachers College at Columbia University, said these students often struggle with what she called cognitive flexibility, which can affect time management, planning, prioritizing, and other such organizational skills and make college classes more difficult to manage. The Heikkinen Report is an independent unit of Teachers College. Fishman at SDSU said students with brain differences might need help taking notes, more time to take exams, or to have instructions repeated to them multiple times. They might miss certain nonverbal communication or cues from their professors or peers. Colleges offer accommodations that can help with some of these challenges, but often students can only unlock this help with a qualifying diagnosis, which can be difficult to get depending on a student's health insurance and access to the appropriate assessments. Many neurodivergent students use medications which must be taken on a certain schedule to help manage their conditions, Elliot said. Problems arise when students' classes are only offered at a time that doesn't work with their medication schedule. If students need such a course to progress in their major, then they're stuck trying to pass it in conditions that don't make sense for them. Elliot said this can lead to attrition or underperformance. And physically being in the classroom can cause stress for students who are sensitive to factors such as flickering fluorescent lights, certain types of sounds, or who have difficulty being around large groups. Some neurodivergent people struggle with understanding social dynamics and cues or with social anxiety. Requiring social interaction by way of graded group projects puts them at a disadvantage. Socialization can pose significant challenges for these students outside the classroom too, as they navigate community living, friendships, and dating. She didn't have a name for what my brother was experiencing, but she knew that it was not in alignment with who he had the potential to be. Neurodivergent college students are often left to figure out how to survive in a system designed by and for people without brain differences. The students must also be their own advocates, often without fully understanding their own needs. The accommodations high schoolers are getting, they don't know that they're getting them. They're just used to always having them, said Melissa Buddock, a learning specialist at Beacon College in Florida. If a student doesn't necessarily know what they need, they don't know what to ask for either. That problem is less common at Beacon College because its entire system is designed for neurodivergent students. Accommodations are embedded in its structure. Big projects are broken into smaller projects with individual deadlines, and extra time is built into the syllabi by giving students advance notice about assignments, Burdick said. Students are required to make regular visits to the Center for Student Success to meet with their learning specialist, who helps them stay on top of their workload, understand the challenges they face, and learn how to advocate for themselves with their professors. Though people with brain differences have always existed, the challenges they face have not been thoroughly understood, nor have they been systems, nor have there been systems in place that could help them move through the world more easily and successfully, said Kimberly White Smith, Dean of the School of Leadership and Education Sciences at the University of San Diego, where the new Center for Embodied Equity and Neurodiversity will be housed. White Smith grew up in the foster care system with a brother who was non-speaking because he didn't talk. Social workers thought he must not have the ability to learn and labeled him uneducable, she said. Her foster mother believed he did have the ability to learn and wanted him to be able to reach his full potential. She fought to have the uneducable label removed and transferred both kids to Catholic school. White Smith's brother eventually began speaking. He did well enough in his classes to graduate from high school. She didn't have a name for what my brother was experiencing, but she knew that it was not in alignment with who he had the potential to be, White Smith said. We're much more aware now than we were 40 years ago. As the public understanding of neurodiversity grows, White Smith said it's incumbent on educators and college leaders to make changes to support these students. There are a lot of challenges that come with being neurodivergent, but there's also a lot of potential, White Smith said. Elliott said that the new center will offer a program that will support Black students with and without brain differences starting in sixth grade. The idea is to help students understand their learning styles, what they need to be successful in school, and how to advocate for themselves as they move towards college. If the students finish high school and qualify for admission to the University of San Diego, they will have a full ride scholarship to attend. Next year, said the center. Next year, Elliott said the center will begin offering a summer bridge program specifically for neurodivergent students with a similar curriculum. It's one thing to ask schools to make accommodations for a learner. It's a whole other empowering thing to help the learner take the bull by the horn and understand themselves, Elliott said. It's teaching each person where their gifts are how they contribute to a whole, and how to use that to navigate a successful higher ed experience.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rashmi Kaushik, and I will be reading from a book called I'll Just Be 5 More Minutes by Emily Ferris, and it's about her experiences with ADHD. Introduction, Part 1, Words About My Life. I should have been proud of myself. It was September 2018, and my family's first holiday card was almost ready to be mailed. Half were even addressed. The only problem, they were 2017's cards, and because I didn't get them done until after Christmas, they said Happy New Year instead of Happy Holidays. I had every intention still of sending the expired greetings, though mostly as a joke, because really, what else was I supposed to do with them? Plus, the photo of my family was really cute. I had spent a week coordinating our outfits, and we paid a professional photographer to make sure the light wouldn't accentuate any of our chins. Anyone who knows me would have been shocked and delighted to get any kind of mail from me, though not at all surprised when they noticed that my then 3-year-old son was pretty much still a baby in the picture. For years, those cards sat in a drawer. I call it my drawer of doom, until the day I impulsively swapped out the Art Deco buffet we'd been using as a bar for a wall-mounted unit. When I cleaned out the old bar, I was forced to confront other things I'd shoved in that drawer, along with the cards. Graduation announcements I'd convinced myself I'd someday send for, a thick stack of certified mail from the IRS that I was afraid to open, overdue medical bills I had opened but hadn't paid, and at least $60 worth of winning but expired scratch-off lottery tickets. The lottery tickets were trash, which I know once, when I was really broke, I had tried to cash in old scratch-offs and they wouldn't allow it. But the rest went into a plastic bin I shoved into a closet because though I was medicated by that point, it was all too overwhelming. My paperwork problem is technically an executive dysfunction, a term used by mental health practitioners to describe difficulties with cognitive, organizational, and emotional tasks. But until I was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or ADHD, at the age of 35, and everyone I knew, along with lots of people in offices I didn't know, saw my paperwork problem as a character flaw. Sure, I was a writer, the family, and internet fans, and most shockingly, a mortgage, but I could never get my life together, at least not for more than a few weeks at a time anyway. In hindsight, my combined ADHD type makes so much sense. I was a kid with a quick temper and a serious lack of impulse control. I interrupted sentences with new ideas, and I'd often get late night bursts of inspiration that kept me up late doing crafty projects way past my bedtime. My brain was always on overdrive, and I hated how slowly the rest of my world moved in comparison, even in elementary school. One of my earliest academic disappointments happened when I was 6 years old. I wrote a letter to my first grade teacher on lined notebook paper, asking if we could skip ahead in our math textbook because I was bored with addition and subtraction. She wrote me back, which was very sweet, but her reply instructed me to be patient. So I decided that I hated math. Now, as a 40-year-old writer, I can barely do basic arithmetic without a calculator. And you know what? I'm too busy working 17 jobs and actively avoiding the mountains of dirty laundry in my basement to be retroactively mad at one elementary school teacher or every adult I ever knew for missing the signs. Still, every once in a while, I wonder what would have happened if I had been accidentally challenged in the ways I was begging to be. Instead of using what my friend Anne calls the magic brain to make great art, or like win a mathathon, I'm too lazy to look it up if that's a real thing. Talking my way out of detention after I'd been sent to the principal's office for talking too much in class, which worked 99% of the time, by the way, is an example of how my brain worked. To make matters worse, Things weren't great at home. My parents divorced when I was 3, and my mom was dealing with her own problems. So she took care of what she could see and feel, like rashes and fevers, but there wasn't anything left for less tangible issues like our mental health. I craved attention, except when I wanted solitude. And I didn't really get either, in part because as I got older, I felt the burden of my time my much more timid younger sister Joe's well-being. Sometimes I joke to Joe now that I was thrown into the role of teen mom when I was only 4 and she was 3. A real babies raising babies situation. Maybe it's that I understood that no one was overly concerned with my needs, but I became a very angry and self-conscious kid. At a young age, I began to hyper-focus on the way adults interacted with me. I read their facial expressions and body language and fixated on the tone of their voices. It didn't take long to figure out that when someone said I was precocious, they really meant obnoxious. At school, I put on a happy face, probably because that's where I got the most validation. It wasn't from other students. Until I had my first sip of a pink wine cooler, I struggled socially. But the handful of teachers who were happy with my lust for learning their chosen subject matter. My early enthusiasm for task-based work meant that I was the kid who did the group project by myself because everyone else would just slow me down, and there was no way I was going to let Ashley, and Brandon mess up my amazing diorama. I got straight A's without trying, did extra credit assignments just for fun, and stimulated my brain by overloading my schedule with a rotating lineup of extracurricular activities. When I got bored with one thing, which always happened, I'd move on to the next, seemingly wasting what educators claimed as was my great potential. By the time I graduated high school, I had somehow earned a reputation as both an overachiever and an underachiever, which sounds impossible, but I promise you it's not. Later, my sporadic attempts to be more like people who had savings accounts and organized closets included going to bed before midnight exactly once and putting away cleaned laundry a couple times a year. Occasionally, I'd read the first few chapters of the latest self-help book about productivity or financial freedom and get really serious about being a responsible adult. But none of it ever stuck, and I finally accepted that I was just kind of a mess, maybe even lazy. At some point, it became a part of my identity. After my diagnosis, my husband Kyle admitted that a few months into marriage, he felt like I had pulled a switcheroo because I stopped focusing on him. What neither of us knew at the time was that I was having a typical ADHD reaction to the end of a big event, or a series of big events. Over the course of fewer than 3 years, I met a man I liked, went on lots of fun dates, and fell in love. Then he moved in, we traveled, we moved into a new house together and got engaged. The climax was an amazing barn party with an open bar, 2 live bands, and a sweet little ceremony at the start. But after the excitement of our wedding weekend, my brain was having what one study calls a dysfunction in the brain reward cascade. My life is peppered with those dysfunctional moments. If I were a boy and perhaps had grown up in a more affluent corner of the world, a teacher or school counselor might have suggested I get screened for ADHD, instead of telling me to just try harder and lecturing me about my tardiness and lack of follow-through. But like so many neurodiverse women and girls and people of color, and really anyone but cis white men, I internalized the criticisms and carried around a lot of shame while I exhausted myself trying to fit into a world that was not built for my brain. And those are the stories I tell in this book. It is estimated that 10 million adults in the United States have ADHD. While I imagine most of my readers are neurodivergent themselves, I'd like to think many of my experiences are more universally relatable. At their heart, these stories are not quite fitting into the world, and for the most part of my life, not really understanding why sometimes something even neurotypical folks have felt at one time or another. Plus, there's all kinds of fun stuff in here. And so read on, and This might be the most relatable thing I've ever written.
For she, her pronouns, and I am currently wearing a light blue sweater with a colorful scarf, and I have long dark hair. Today I'm going to be reading a selection from Leah Lakshmi Piepzna Samarasina's The Future is Disabled, Prophecies, Love Notes, and Morning Songs. This selection is called The Free Library of Beautiful Adaptive Things. I'm browsing through my email when my eye falls on an announcement from my local library that they are rolling out their new library of things. I'm charmed and read on. At the Library of Things, you can check out birding backpacks, fishing tackle in boxes, musical instruments, light therapy boxes. It's Seattle. We have no sun for 6 months of the year. And wait for it, adaptive devices, or aids for better living for individuals with disabilities, as the website calls them. I click the link, and the website explains in a big, accessible font and plain language what everything is and what kinds of disabilities it might be useful for. There are all kinds of things. Adaptive controllers for Xboxes, playing cards with enlarged numbers, grabbers to help someone reach a dropped item, rose and yellow colored glasses to help people with migraines and TBIs use screens for longer, basic AAC, augmentative and alternative communication devices for non-speaking people, utensils with soft foam handles for people who have a hard time grasping, and utensils with weighted handles to steady hand tremors. I'm blinking back tears. The library is so beautiful, and I'm 46 years old, and this is the first time I've seen anything like it. It's so much easier to find information about right to die legislation pushing euthanasia for disabled people than an adaptive device library that might help make your life rock. There are many times I could have used the library of adaptive things to help my disabled life be more awesome. To try out a new device without paying for it, to use it for a little while if I only needed it temporarily, to not have to pay for it when I was poor, to be able to access it without having to have a series of arguments with my doctor or insurance provider that I should be able to access it. It's so hard for many newly disabled or newly disabled in a different way people to try a wheelchair or a jar opener because of lack of access to money and medicine, and because shame and internalized ableism tells us that using any of these things is pathetic, but also because it's so hard to find information about adaptive technology at all. Have you ever tried to research using a new adaptive device? Was the info about it easy to find? And was it easy to find devices that were cute and affordable? Or were you hesitantly Googling, getting overwhelmed, and putting your computer down, defeated? The library creates space for a more playful, curious, and flexible space to explore disability and changing access needs. One where disability is a matter-of-fact, everyday reality. And of course, here is this publicly accessible, free library of tools that can help you live it well. I want one in every neighborhood.
Hi, I'm Kelly Aiken. I am the tech tutor here at Highline College, and I'm going to be reading from Unmasking Autism by Devin Price, PhD. This section is called What is Masking? In the psychological literature on the subject, autism masking is said to consist of two classes of behavior. Camouflaging, which is attempting to hide or obscure autistic traits in order to blend in with neurotypicals. The main goal of camouflage is to avoid detection as disabled. And compensation, using specific strategies to overcome challenges and impairments related to disability. The main goal of compensation is to maintain the appearance of high independent functioning. All mass statistics employ both compensatory and camouflaging strategies to help us get by and apply them to a wide variety of tasks we find challenging. Someone might verbally camouflage by forcing themselves not to speak too much about their special interests, for example, and socially compensate by researching a friend's Facebook post before meeting up with them so they'll have a good idea of what to chat about. A person might camouflage their auditory sensitivities by gritting their teeth through the pain and never complaining about it, or they might compensate for it by wearing subtle noise-canceling earbuds that don't stand out as unusual. When I introduce neurotypical people to the concept of autism masking, they usually understand it as a social process or performance. It's true that masking involves things like memorizing social rules and feigning friendliness, but that's really just the most obvious form it takes. Most of us have to mask everything from our information processing style to our lack of coordination, to our limited food preferences, to the fact that we require more rest than neurotypical people are expected to. Masking shapes the fields we work in, how we dress and carry ourselves, where we live. Mass autistics tend to arrange our lives around our limitations and needs and sacrifice anything that might demand too much energy out of us. An impressive resume or academic transcript might hide the fact that our homes are messy, our hair is unbrushed, and we haven't socialized with anybody recreationally in months. In a few key areas, we may appear to be functioning highly, but that facade requires we let everything else in life fall apart. My friend Jess once described their compensation this way. It's like going to the grocery store, but only being able to bring home what you can sneak into your pockets when nobody is looking. And everybody else gets to just go through the checkout and buy as much as they want, so they don't understand why you find shopping stressful. Jess has ADHD, but their description of how challenging it is to lie, cheat, and steal your way through a neurotypical looking life when you lack the accommodations you need is just as relevant to life as a masked autistic person. Regular life is more cognitively and emotionally demanding for neurodiverse people than it is for neurotypicals, but we have to hide that fact from other people on a daily basis. To prop up our facade of being high functioning, we build a messy, unstable scaffolding of flawed coping mechanisms. It's no wonder we report anxiety and depression at elevated rates. If the only food you ever get to eat is what you can steal, you're going to move through the world feeling undernourished and hypervigilant. Though masking is incredibly taxing and causes us a lot of existential turmoil, it's rewarded and facilitated by neurotypical people. Masking makes autistic people easier to deal with. It renders us compliant and quiet. It also traps us. Once you've proven yourself capable of suffering in silence, neurotypical people tend to expect you'll be able to do it forever, no matter the cost. Being a well-behaved autistic person puts us in a real double bind and forces many of us to keep masking for far longer and for far more pervasively than we want to.